Assalamualaikum and hello. Welcome to episode 2 of our parent webinar series. I'm Sabine Bilal from Creative Kinder House, and I have Lauren and Katie with me from EBCS. So say hi to everyone.
Hi, guys. All right, guys. All right, so today we're going to be talking about teaching pre-academic skills at home. And we know that last week we talked about the pre-Mac principle, and there will be a lot of that in today's as well. You will hear the same topics in a lot of our webinars. They come up a lot because we use them all together, right? We're using all the skills that we're giving you guys the tools to use together. So this topic, we're going to break it down in a couple sections here. We're going to break it down for a little bit, and we're going to do a couple of the webinars this way. We're going to give you kind of little pockets of skills in order to kind of promote more independence and kind of prepare them for going to schools, like that pre-academic thing. That's their foundation that they need to be successful moving forward.
Yes, which is awesome. We want children that are independent and going to demonstrate success when they enter kindergarten or any academic school or preschool, or even just going to playgroups.
That's right. Or even if there's like breaks, right? If we're not in schools or summer or winter or whatever, during these breaks, it's good to practice these skills depending on what level your child is on. And it can help them kind of get them back in the groove of going back to school, right?
So our first thing we're going to talk about is teaching your child to match.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do this, right? And so we know that there's like things you can buy, and there's books you can do, there's all kinds of materials you can buy, but you can also use things at home that you just have around. You can use toys that you already have and use them to practice matching, right? Because that's a skill. We need them to match colors. We need them to match items of clothing, all kinds of things around the house. What kinds of things do you think we could use, you guys? What do we think?
So one thing I always tell parents is use what you have, because if it's in your environment, your child is already exposed to it. And my favorite thing to do is use your cell phone, take a picture of what you want them to match. So if it's 2 blocks, and so it's like, oh, let's create this. And so matching to that picture that you have on your phone. And that way you already have the items, you're not having to buy anything new. And it's really, it creates that joint play that we really want to see. This can also be used for clothing items, like chores around the house, matching socks. I know that's one thing my parents love to have me do with the child.
Right, because we want, if we're going to be teaching our kids skills, it's nice that they also benefit our household, right? Or us as parents, right? So, if we can have our children match socks, it can help with the laundry, right? Just like how we touched on last week on helping set the table before dinner, right? Before you get to do this cool thing, we're going to work on matching a little bit, right? We're going to work on, can you match your sock to this other sock and put it in the drawer, right? And so these are things we can model and help practice.
And one thing we touched on last week was pre-Mac principle, and so using first then. And so once you're matching, like first put the spoon on the table, then you put the plate. So matching, this is types of spoons, and it could be first one-to-one matching. So matching an exact replica of that spoon, to then matching like, okay, well, this is also a spoon. It could be plastic or metal. And so different types of matching, which are wonderful.
Can you just elaborate and tell our parents why matching is so important? Why is it such an important skill for kids to have?
So matching is something, if you think about it, we do it all the time. So how many times do we read a phone number and we're typing that on our phone? So we're still using that skills as adults. We're following directions, and we're making a grocery list and matching items that we need. So it might not look just like a picture of a phone to toy items. And so this is just a gateway skill. It allows our children to interact more, have more independence. So you can hold up an item, say, oh, well, find this, like find your other sneaker. So
Right.
holding up that
Yeah.
sneaker and having the child search around the room for that sneaker. Because how many times are you getting ready to leave the house and you're searching for a sneaker? Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it opens, it's really, the word we typically use, and it might, roll out of our mouths in more webinars to come, is cusps. And I think I probably said it in the last one. So it's exactly what Lauren was saying, right? Yeah, like it's a prerequisite. It's a cusp to other things. So if you can match your sneakers, right? Like if you as a parent are like, where's your other shoe? It looks like this, right? They can go find it, and then they get to go outside. That's, then they get to go out and do other skills, and they can show you other things that they can do, and you can work on other stuff. So it really is one of those just like milestone things, right? To learn how to match, because it opens so many doors to more difficult skills and tasks.
And it's wonderful because it also works on joint attention of an item. So your child, when I say joint attention, I'm talking about your child and you are both looking at the same thing. So this is a great cusp that if your child has joint attention, we can teach so many other skills. So if they're looking at that item, you are looking at the item, and they recognize like, hey, I know where that is. I know what it is. And they're able to independently pull that item forward. That's a great cusp that we can build off of quite readily.
Right. And it's something that is practiced a lot at school too, right? So if you're doing this at home, those skills are going to generalize at home and at school. So if your child is able to do something at home and at school, they're also more likely to do it in other settings, right? And across other settings and with other adults. So it's just preparing your child even more to be able to exhibit these skills across the board, right? Which promotes learning even more skills. So it's just kind of where we start, right?
Yes. And we're going to touch on that in our next slide too.
Yes, we are. So following instructions. This is huge. This is it, right? We want our kids to listen to us. As teachers, we want our kids to listen to us,
Just generally we want people to listen.
Yeah, right. We want our kids to recognize and respect adults enough to do what they ask, right? We don't want to hear at school that our child's not following directions. We always want to hear that they are following directions, right? And that can start at home. And a term we use is instructional control. Do we have instructional control of our students at school? And it's something we would ask parents, like, let's work on this also with you in your relationship, building that relationship with your child at home. Yes. And if we're using the same language, we're using the same ABA principles, like PreMac principle, which is that first do this, then you get this language. If we're all using it, it's going to be even easier to gain that instructional control, and your kids will follow directions even more.
Exactly. Yeah. We want our children first, when we're starting to follow instructions, to practice something that they're maybe already doing. So maybe it is brushing their teeth. So simple instructions and breaking it down, like, okay, I want you to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush. And so just starting with those instructions and building there. And oftentimes it's really important to find what the child is interested in. And we're going to really hit on motivating items for the child, and motivating activities. So if it's something that your child wants to do, so like, let's say playing outside and playing basketball or football, kicking the ball, for instance. So it's like, first kick it here and then run this way. So we're not only following instructions, but we're also utilizing the PreMac principle that we talked about last week. And that also helps if you practice it not just at home and not just with mom or dad, but with other adults, other siblings, other friends, just so your child isn't only listening to one person. They learn to follow instructions for everyone.
Right. And especially for our kids and our students with disabilities or special needs, this following directions has to be taught, right? They have to understand that they are going to get reinforced. They are going to get something they want that is motivating for following instructions, Right. So we have to establish that as the instructor or the parent or the adult who is seeking instructional control. So to do that, we use PreMac principle, like Lauren was just talking about, that we discussed in our last. Please go take a look at our last webinar if you missed it, or if you just want to kind of recap on what PreMac is, because we are going to say it so often. This is something I use every single day in my job. I try to use it with my cats, but they don't listen, but you know. But your kids will. So it is important to start with something easy, right? Something we know they can do. So just like with those matching examples, if your child is matching socks appropriately and they're able to match colors and they're matching pictures to the phone that you've taken and they're doing really well, it'd be a great place to start with kind of establishing that instructional control, using that first in language to promote following instructions with something they can do. We want to make it simple at first so that they can reach that reinforcement, they can reach that thing that they like that is motivating, so that they learn, oh, okay, if I do this one little thing that I'm already good at, that's easy. Like, sure, I can totally match a sock to a sock. I'm awesome. Yay. Now I get a snack. You know, if I can do something like that, oh, you learn like my mom or my dad's going to give me that cool snack because I did that. And then you slowly increase task demand, right? You slowly, you know, you work your way up to that thing they really hate to do, which could be brushing their teeth or like cleaning a section of the room or cleaning up toys they hate cleaning up, you know, something a little harder.
You know, food they don't really like eating.
Yeah, that's a great point, right?
Yeah. So it's okay, well, we're gonna eat this, this, and this, and then this.
Yeah, because that's a whole topic, right? There's the expanding kind of food likes and ability to eat foods they don't like, because some kids are super picky, right?
So, but I think a big thing with following instructions is building. A lot of children with autism have a higher receptive language than they do expressive. And when I say receptive, it's how they input language and any stimulus from the world around them. And expressively is how they are sharing their wants, needs, and anything that they statements, feelings, how they are sharing that with their world. So we want to play to the child's strength, so they have a higher ability to take in information than they do expressing it. So by teaching to follow instructions, we're working with that child's strengths, building a more independent child and exposing them to the language and to just basic tasks that are going to be making them a more independent and successful person.
And does this instructional control, does it come overnight? How long does it take? Because, you know, parents always want.
It's a great question.
It takes time, right? It can't come immediately.
It does take time. Sabine, that's a beautiful question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It takes a different amount of time for different skills, right, with your kids. But I would say it's going to take a less amount of time if you start with something small, you start with something highly motivating and something that you know they can already do. So if you're working on like a new task, like a novel skill, if you're working on setting the table or tying your shoes, that might not be the best place to start if you don't already feel you have that instructional control, or if you're struggling with your kids listening and following directions. Start with something small. Don't just jump to the thing that's driving you nuts and that you're really trying to get a hold of. You'll get there, we promise, but start small. Like with anything, it's if you break it up into smaller bits and if you start with something easier, it's going to go smoother, right? You're not going to have as many like maladaptive behaviors, right?
Yes.
So I would love to give you like a day or a week time frame, but unfortunately it just depends. But my biggest piece of advice would be to start with something small and motivating.
Yeah,
for sure.
And also staying consistent with the instructions. And a big thing is when we are giving instructions, is not being too verbose. We want to give concise, clear instructions. So if it's put your food in the trash and then go to your room. So maybe just food and trash, then go to room. So making it that instead of saying, okay, when you're done, let's put the food in the trash. And because it's almost bedtime, let's go to our room. So we want to, once again, play to the child's receptive strength, but we want it to be concise and clear. So there's no question when we have these instructions.
That's a beautiful point. That's where that first do this, then you get this PreMac principle language comes in. If you're, yeah, and look, I'm a talker. Like, I love talking with kids. I love talking to students. But I know that if I'm working specifically on something like following instructions, and I'm using PreMac principle, if I think of just first then, if those two words are in my brain, that's going to help me not just like say all the things Lauren said, like, well, first we're going to do this because of this, and then we're going to do, you know, it is always important for your child to know the why behind what you're asking them to do. That's all important. But when you're actually getting down to first do this, then do this, and then they get what they want, keep it simple and concise, like Lauren said, and it's going to help that time frame again. If you keep it short and simple and concise and consistent, then it's going to be much more successful.
And telling the other people that are working with your child, so whether that is another parent, our aunt, uncle, grandma, sibling, that we're going to keep this across the board. So we're not going to be talking so much. We're going to be giving short, concise directions, and that'll help generalize so that skill to other people. And as we talk about other people, we can also go into play skills, because that's definitely important to have other people for.
Lauren keeps us on track, thankfully. Yes, our next one is developing play skills. And so we don't think of this as always as a skill, right? We think, oh, well, our kids play and that's it. But actually, some of our kids struggle with this, especially at school. And it's things that we don't think we have to teach, but we kind of do. So kids learn from modeling, right? So to model things, and Lauren will get all into that. But it is important to develop these things and to promote play skills in the right way.
Yeah. And I think one thing I know I see a lot, and Sabine and Katie, let me know if you see this a lot, is that kids, when they're interacting with toys, they might not be interacting with them appropriately. Do y'all see that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's maybe something that you guys are seeing at home with your children, where they have toys and they engage with them, but is it a train that they are swinging over their head?
I've seen that. Yeah.
Are they only focusing on the lamp in the dollhouse and it's not appropriate? So that it almost becomes like, yes, they're engaging, but are they doing it in an age appropriate, even item appropriate manner? And so looking at that. And when we're looking at developing play skills, it's finding what is interesting to your child. So finding that item that your child loves. So if it's a dollhouse, if it is action figures, or building in the sand. I'm trying to think, Katie, you had one child in your room who loved Play-Doh and all sorts of stuff, but he wasn't engaging in it appropriately.
Right. So we had a really good example of that. It's a great point, Lauren, is we had this really cool like plastic plate with sections in it, kind of you'd probably use for dips or something, but we used it for sorting, right? So he had to put in, so we had this bucket of like foam shapes, and had to sort them in the right spots in this like big platter with different sections in it, like the stars and circles and circles. And that would be like functionally and appropriately, he'd be playing with it and putting it in the right spots, right? Because he did really, really like these shapes. That was motivating for him. So I knew putting that in front of him, he was going to like those shapes. But he wasn't sorting them. He would just kind of like do other things with the shapes and like stack and like, you know, kind of perseverate. And it, you know, he did have an autism label. And so he, you know, he'd perseverate on things and not actually play with them or put them in the way that he was supposed to.
Yeah.
So
one thing that's really awesome to do in that situation when you're seeing a child that's not doing it appropriate is modeling with the child. Okay, we're going to hand over hand, put this here, do this. We're going to make this house, do this. Imaginative play is also very an abstract concept for a lot of our children. And so maybe not starting with pretend play, but starting with just engaging appropriately. Like, okay, we're going to put this in the bedroom of the dollhouse, and we're going to put this item in the kitchen of the dollhouse. And so also working on those following directions. And so modeling that might even start as hand over hand, and then slowly fading back those prompts. And we want to also response block. So stopping any of the behavior that is inappropriate. Like I have a child I'm currently working with who likes, he will take links that link together and swing them and shake them. And so we let him put the links together, but then we kind of block him from swinging it because that can be dangerous when no one wants to get hit.
Right.
And so once your child is engaging appropriately and you're seeing, okay, well, we're using this in a more functional manner, we really want to then start targeting having other children, maybe not playing with them, but playing next to them in a very similar format, using it appropriately, engaging in similar activities. And so this is called parallel play. So the children are like two parallel lines. They're both doing similar things, but they're not connecting. The children aren't looking at each other really. They're not playing together, but we want to see maybe they're engaging. They're modeling for each other. And as we, sorry, of course I get a phone call during this too. So we want to have slowly build from that parallel play to they are now intersecting. So maybe having a child come in and ask for a piece from that dollhouse, and asking and saying, hey, can I do this? Can I help with this? If you're working on the train, like, I'm going to add to your train or build to your tracks. So working within that realm and using that structure. So working first with finding what's motivating, practicing it and modeling that, having a peer or someone near them to engage in a similar activity. And then finally, when we really love to see is when they're all asking for things,
playing appropriately together. Yeah.
And initially that intersection might be really facilitated, saying like, oh, ask so-and-so, or maybe they have this, you need this item. Like if you're playing in the sand and the child has a shovel and they need a bucket. So you can say, okay, well, they have a bucket. What do we have to do? We have to ask, whether that is PECs or verbally or sign. We definitely want to create those moments.
Right. And to kind of tie it all together, because we are reaching our time limit, we're going to try to respect that this time. We would get excited. So to kind of tie it all together, this developing the play skills and you've got the parallel play, because I know a lot of our kids don't always want to interact with other kids and they don't want to play with their siblings in an appropriate way right at home. So it can be taught, right? And what Lauren was saying is you start somewhere, right? You start with modeling with them and blocking if they're not using it appropriately, like the sandbox. So you've got both of your kids in the sandbox, you've got one kid just shoveling sand out of it, right? You have to use those following instructions that we talked about. We can use that PreAcademic principle. First of all, block it, right? That response blocking that Lauren was talking about. But also we can say first, if you took the shovel from his like, first sit, then I give you a shovel and we keep it in the sandbox, right? And then you get to play. And modeling how to play for them, and then bring in a sibling and see if you can kind of promote those intersectional playing opportunities. It all ties together. So all these little skills that we're talking about, the instructional control and the PreAcademic principle and the play skills, they're all highly important, but we have to remember they have to be taught, right? They have to be modeled, and the good behaviors have to be reinforced, meaning they have to get something good out of it, like praise from you as the parent or the teacher, or just access to the toy after they've exhibited playing with it correctly. So we have to make sure that we are teaching and reinforcing the things that we want to see and making sure we're consistent and we use that language appropriately and across the board. So making sure like across parents, you're both using the same language, right? And you're both using the same things. Or siblings, if you have a sibling, like if you have an older child, that also helps take care of your younger child, make sure that they're on board too. So all of these things come together and are really important.
Yes. And we also, we want to generalize that.
Yeah. And so we've come to the end of our next webinar. Next week, we will be doing 3 more topics. We'll be doing it in kind of this way. We've got this system going, but please reach out to us if there's a topic you really want to go over or anything like that. Check us both out, Creative Kinderhouse and EBCS is both on Facebook and Instagram as well. And so please reach out to us. This is for you guys, and we're just trying to give you tools as parents that you can use that also helps out us teachers. So
yes, thank you so much for being a part of our webinar today.
Yeah.